Imagine doing something so important to you that you end up changing the course of history forever. The men, women, and children who bravely settled Rhode Island nearly 400 years ago brought with them a strong desire for freedom of religion. In the 1600s, our founding mothers and fathers, Roger Williams, Anne Hutchinson, and John Clark, all left the religiously rigid, strict atmosphere of the Massachusetts Bay Colony to live in a more tolerant environment. As Rhode Island's towns grew and new immigrants arrived, these settlers built not only homes, but created a community where they could openly pray and prosper. Note, on July 3rd, 1663, King Charles II granted the charter that officially established the colony of Rhode Island. This charter, which took 12 years to receive, was unique in the British-controlled colonies, as it was the first to allow its inhabitants not only to pray freely, but the right to self-govern. By calling Rhode Island a lively experiment, King Charles emphasized its uniqueness. He said, quote, "To hold forth a lively experiment, that a most flourishing civil state may stand and best be maintained, and that among our English subjects with full liberty in religious concernments." The charter granted religious freedom and citizenship for Protestant Christians, but it also granted religious tolerance for others. It is no wonder the tiny colony of Rhode Island became a beacon of hope, attracting many displaced and persecuted religious minority groups from across the world, including Baptists, Quakers, and Jews. The legacy of religious freedom and civil liberty in public life still resonates today in Rhode Island. Recognizing the importance of looking at the present through the lens of history, the Touro Synagogue Foundation has received a Rhode Island Foundation grant to create the Pathways to Understanding middle school program. This video is the first step for students, educators, parents, and civic organizations to explore the history of religious freedom, diversity, and dialogue in colonial times and today's society, and was created to set the stage for the upcoming on-site youth retreat.
George Washington came to Newport 3 times. His last visit in August of 1790 was most likely to say thank you to Rhode Island for finally ratifying the Constitution and to ratify the Bill of Rights. In keeping with the custom of the time, when Washington arrived on the morning of August 17th with his Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson, he received letters from many of Newport's civic, commercial, and religious leaders. One of these letters was from Moses Seixas, the warden of Newport's Hebrew congregation. In his letter, Seixas thanked President Washington for all the opportunities available, not only to the Jewish community, but to other minorities as well. He went on to ask the president if religious tolerance under the new government would continue. After all, history has repeatedly shown that the installation of a new government often resulted in drastic consequences for minorities, with people forced to flee, or worse. Seixas eloquently wrote, "Deprived as we heretofore have been of the invaluable rights of free citizens, we now, with a deep sense of gratitude to the Almighty Disposer of all events, behold a government erected by the majesty of the people, a government which to bigotry gives no sanction, to persecution no assistance, but generously affording to all liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship, deeming everyone of whatever nation, tongue, or language equal parts of the great governmental machine." In his response to the Hebrew congregation in Newport, President Washington forcefully affirmed the Founding Fathers' commitment to the principles of religious freedom. There are 2 well-known lines in the letter. One, a restated phrase from the Seixas letter, "Happily the government of the United States gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance," is the line most often recited. However, The real substance of the letter is when President Washington stated that toleration and equality are not the same. "It is now no more," he said, "that toleration is spoken of as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoys the exercise of their inherent natural rights." He finished the paragraph. "They who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving on all occasions their effectual support." In other words, if you are a good citizen, it is your birthright in the United States to live a life with religious equality. It is important to note that the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights guarantees freedoms that were not explicit in the original Constitution, such as freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the right to assemble. Congress may not promote any one religion and may not pass any laws that restrict a person's right to their own religious beliefs. This entitlement to liberty of conscience is proudly a Rhode Island legacy. The convictions and actions of Rhode Island's founding fathers and mothers, with their lively experiment, laid the groundwork for what was to become an integral part of the American ethos, freedom of religion. However, in a terrible irony, the history of Newport is also about those who did not find freedom there, enslaved Africans and the African American community. Thus, Newport's early history embodies one of the central paradoxes of America, the coexistence of slavery and freedom, along with an intermingling of noble ideals about liberty with the poison of racism.
Freedom of religion is a very important principle and value that we as Rhode Islanders, as Americans, and as human beings, they have that right to be free, to choose the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So it's very consistent with what it is that we believe as Americans, and that we are endowed by God, our Creator, to pursue life that makes happiness. So there's a lot of prejudice, there's a lot of bias, and a lot of misinformation, exactly what Muslims are, what Muslims do. And one of the biggest falsehood is that Islam is spread by the sword, particularly here in the Western culture. This has almost been a narrative that's been going on for the longest time. And Muslims are those who submit to do God's will, and that means to be just, to be kind, to be loving. And once you know that, you can dispel a lot of the false narratives that exist today. There was a wrong. So how do we correct the wrong and not perpetuate the same wrong? How do we heal from that? How do we reconcile the past sins of generations that came before us? This is the challenge for us today. Education perhaps is the greatest tool that we could utilize in reconciling what took place in the past.
Judaism gives me an opportunity to live life to the fullest and gives me the opportunity to challenge myself, to live up to the wonderful example of people found in the Bible: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, the first Jews that are mentioned in the Bible. And my goal of everyday living is to follow in their footsteps. Right here in this area where we're sitting and we're standing is where George Washington visited the congregation here and made a very important declaration that all people are entitled and are blessed to have their own faith and their own religion in this country. And I think that's a very, very important statement because around the world it's not always that way, and people didn't feel welcome to practice their own religion. They had to do it quietly, privately, behind closed doors. So I want middle school students to be aware of the fact that we are given a right in this country for each group to practice as they please and to welcome all diversity and all different types of religions. Not everyone appreciates other faiths, and they want everything to be the same, but that wasn't the original plan that the founding fathers had wanted, and that's the blessing of George Washington's message. There were Jewish people involved in the slave trade. How do we deal with that as a congregation? I think we're very open about it, But now it's our job to improve. So we take history from the past to teach us the present so that we can move to a better future.
It's important for middle schoolers to understand religious freedom and religious history because I think as Americans today, we can't even conceive of a time where our government would have dictated what our religion should be. You know, we've grown up just knowing what we know, which is that you can go to any church you want or you cannot go to church. I think learning about our history and recognizing how far we come helps us continue to propel into the future and to continue to be better versions of ourselves that help everyone be free in the best ways possible. I think it's really hard to reconcile our pride around Rhode Island's history of religious freedom and the fact that many of those religious people that came here to seek that freedom were slave owners. The Episcopal Church was a huge part of the slave trade in Rhode Island, and we've done quite a bit of work to look into that and to come to terms with that, because the process of reconciliation, especially in this way, is really complicated, and I think we're still trying to figure out a roadmap through that. And so when we talk about basing our current day religion on tradition, a lot of what we need to consider is what were the pitfalls, what were the harms done as part of that tradition, and how can we come to terms with that, ask for forgiveness, make it right as much as we possibly can, and move forward in a way that stops perpetuating that harm in our culture. And there's just such a need for that right now.
My stepfather and I, we own a small business. Shortly after 9/11, the news had broke that a lot of those terrorists were from the Middle East. And my stepfather's shop had been vandalized because he is from the Middle East. We ended up, at the time, putting up an American flag in the window of our store to show that we love our country. We didn't want the violence or the vandalism of our shop to continue. So that was difficult for us. Due to our religious beliefs, we don't sell pork or alcohol or lottery tickets, gambling in our shops. And we've had customers that come in and ask for those items, and when they realize we don't, they've expressed their disgust for us not selling those products. They've called some of us names. Again, it's not the majority of people, but it does happen.
Rhode Island is kind of like the home base where it all began. Roger Williams and Hutchinson, they had different doctrinal beliefs other than with the Puritans in Massachusetts. And in those days, they wanted you to follow what we tell you. And so they kicked Roger Williams and Ian Hutchinson and others out of Massachusetts. The practice of enslaving other people, and that practice was woven into the doctrines that they preached, to the point where they had a slave Bible that was used when teaching slaves about the faith. Certain scriptures were whited out, such as "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." They didn't want the Africans to get any idea that they too could be free. So it was woven into the doctrine in those days, and as Christians, they were taught that was part of their being a good Christian.
Why is it important for middle school students to know about the history of religious tolerance and civil rights in Rhode Island?
I think it's important because people came to Newport, they would have free rights and they could be whatever they want. I think it's important that we know that and why they came here.
Some people say that we should tolerate people from different groups, and others say that that's not enough. What do you think about those two terms?
I think we should treat people equal, because tolerant is like you're not really welcoming people. We should welcome everybody and be kind to everybody.
Do you think young people, are there things that they misunderstand or misjudge about other religious or social groups?
I think some people don't understand the traditions that people have, so I think we could learn more about that too.
On the one hand, you're saying you should know about the religious and cultural groups in your community. On the other hand, you're saying it shouldn't matter what people are. Can those two things go together at the same time?
I think they can, because you should know about what people are, but it shouldn't matter of how you treat them.
Have you experienced or seen other kids experience being excluded because of who they are?
Yeah, I have seen it, and they're being who they are, and people are just not accepting that.
Do you ever hear kids in your class get called names because they're different?
Yeah, people shouldn't be judged off of their skin color or what they believe in or what they think.
Do you think kids need to know that those kinds of things still happen?
Probably. Knowing once in a period of time that we are not all equal.
If you had an opportunity to come to this building and to learn about the history of different racial and religious groups in Newport and about discrimination that's still happening today and what we could do about it, would you be interested?
Yeah. Yeah. If they came here, they would learn new things.
What religious or ethnic or cultural groups in your community are you familiar with, and what are some that you'd like to know more about?
I think I'm very familiar with Judaism because I have a couple neighbors that I am very good friends with, and we go to some of their holidays and celebrations and learn more about their culture. But one culture that I think I don't learn about enough is the Hispanic culture. I know about the symbol things like Cinco de Mayo, but I don't really know a lot about their history and their past.
How much do you think you and your peers know about the different social and religious and cultural groups in your community?
I think there still could be stuff that we could learn about different cultures, how different people practice different religions and what they believe in.
Do you think it's important to learn about the history of religious freedom in Rhode Island?
Yes, I do. I think it's very important to learn about what happened in the past, and I think it could also change how we think today and how we see things.
It's important for middle school students to learn about religion in Rhode Island and how it was founded, because in order for them to get anywhere, they've got to know where they've been. They've got to know what people went through, how they fought for their religious freedoms. If they don't have an understanding of that history, they won't know how to fight for themselves. It's important to fight for what you believe in, because nobody's going to do that fight for you.
Hello, my name is Nellie Gorbea, and I'm Rhode Island's Secretary of State. As Secretary of State, one of my duties is to manage the state archives. It is our responsibility at the government to ensure that all Rhode Island residents have access to documents that tell the story of our great state and nation. I am very excited to support the Pathways to Understanding program for middle school students, because it will help to increase awareness of Rhode Island and American history, particularly in the areas of religious diversity and civil liberties. The video and the on-site program will provide students with an opportunity to learn about the role of religious freedom in public life. We will explore the history of religious freedom and civil liberties and the importance of civil dialogue. When it becomes possible, students will visit a variety of sites that represent early religious diversity, civil discourse, and public debate. We hope you will have thoughtful conversations about religious freedom and tolerance. This unique experience and highly interactive program are meant to help you learn not only about local history, but to provide you with the time for personal reflection and critical thinking. I look forward to sharing our important state history and the accomplishments of so many diverse religious institutions that have been committed to freedom and understanding. I also hope you will leave this space proud to be part of a Rhode Island history, a community that was first in promoting religious freedom.
On behalf of the Touro Synagogue Foundation, thank you for joining us today as we navigate together this pathway to understanding. We look forward to greeting you personally when you come for a visit to Touro Synagogue. I would like to extend a special thank you to all of our participants today and to the Rhode Island Foundation for making this program possible.